All right. Welcome, everybody, to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny Budinsky, and I am your host for today's program, Dismantling So-Called Evidence for Evolution. And the question is evolution really a thing? As Dr. Dino, always a privilege and a pleasure to have here with me, we are going to continue our response to CrashCourse's video, who does put out good science-based videos, but it's once they get into science fiction, like the topic of evolution, that they go wrong. And so Kent and I are here to fix that problem. Now, Kent, did you know that after hundreds of hours of content together addressing this topic of common descent, there are still people out there that believe they're related to mosquitoes, banana plants, and whales?
It is sad, brother. It's a target-rich environment. Yep. They've been trained to believe something real stupid. Evolution's the dumbest idea in the world.
Agreed. And we're going to show the audience why tonight again. And so, Kent, to start off the show, I'd like to point out the fact that we've had an ongoing evolution debate challenge series for 2+ years. And so you've done just a huge multitude of debates. And so for those evolutionists out there that still believe that they're related to banana plants, whales, walking sticks, you name it. Kent, you got that chart actually, where a lot of the evolutionists you debate, we know what, yep, that one too shows that they all go back to single-celled like ancestor. They're related to strawberries.
Yeah, they believe they're related to a strawberry, a rose, a worm, everything. Everything's related. You tell them, I said that's real stupid. I'll debate them on it anytime.
And behind you there's the evolutionism family tree.
Oh, yeah.
Professor Dave, related to a strawberry.
Yeah, I got a bunch more to add to that tree, brother. I asked him, are you related to a snail? Yeah. You related to a strawberry? Yeah. You related to a cockroach? Yeah. They really believe that.
They believe it's science.
Brainwashing, but not.
So for those that still believe that, feel free to reach out. The debate challenge is still ongoing. So if you want to step into the debate octagon with Dr. Dino himself, we'll set it up. We'll have some fun. Actually, Kent, I just finished watching your last 2 in-person debates on the topic of evolution, atheism, creation. And I thought you did an excellent job. I've got several points I'd like to bring up at some point during today's show, but I'm curious as to what your thoughts were on those debates and your interlocutors' arguments for evolution.
Well, the one I did the other day against Mandissa Thomas, I was shocked that anybody could believe what she believes. It's just who taught you this stuff, you know? There's no evidence of any animal ever producing babies that are other than the same kind. They're just not, it's a religious belief, and they will never admit that. So it's pretty sad. I've done so many debates, I don't remember what the other one was. Brother, do you remember I'll take Matt Dillahunty on anytime. I'll take anybody on. Mark Bergen, MD. Bergen. Yeah. They've been brainwashed into believing something that just simply is illogical, impossible, and stupid. Real stupid.
You know, there was a section, if I remember correctly, in both debates where they were scoffing at the concept of young earth creation. You spent several minutes going through slides and some truly fascinating lines of evidence for young earth creation, lines of evidence that limit the age of the earth. The recession of the moon was one. The shrinking of the sun, I think, was another. And both interlocutors, pro-evolutionists, they dodged. They did not address those arguments, Dr. Dino. And so go ahead.
Yeah, time is the first thing they have to have. In order for evolution to even get a start, you got to have billions of years. And if you can prove the earth is not billions of years old, which is easy to do, then that takes away their time. I'm sorry. If I told you if you kiss a frog, it'll turn to a prince, you'd say that's a fairy tale. But if I tell you if you give the frog millions of years, it'll turn to a prince. Oh, now it's modern science. It's still a fairy tale, guys. So my video number 1, if people want more on that seminar, I don't have my seminar. Bobby, get me a new set of my seminar tape. But video number 1 is about the age of the earth, about 30 or 40 different ways to prove it can't be billions of years old. period. If you need billions of years for your theory, sorry, get a new theory. Can't have.
Can you briefly talk about, because we got a critic here in the chat, and we always appreciate our critics and our skeptics. Andrew Cumming, he says, shrinking of the sun, you have to be kidding. And so by shrinking of the sun, can you speak to this a little bit? Is it the fact that the sun's losing mass? And so if you go back billions of years, it would have been a lot bigger, hotter, it's losing fuel. Can you speak to that, Kent?
I think it's obvious to anybody with one eyeball and working and half a brain cell working that the sun is up there and the sun is burning. Nobody argues about that. The sun's burning 4 million tons of fuel every second. It's burning. Go look at it. Okay, I got plenty of sun today. All right. In 1,000 years, that would take 31 billion seconds at 4 million tons a second. If you go back just 1,000 years, the sun was heavier. Obviously, it's burning 4 million tons a second. So a heavier sun would upset the balance between the sun and Earth and all the other planets. It's a gravitational dance we're doing here. Is the sun shrinking? Yep. Since 1980, they've yielded different results. How much is the sun shrinking? The sun is burning, and it kind of oscillates. It shrinks and swells and shrinks and swells. But overall, it's tending towards shrinking. We've observed it for a long time. The sun is shrinking about 5 feet an hour. I don't know too many people that argue with that. Let's see. Sun is shrinking. In the last few sessions, we covered numerous scientific evidences that Earth universe cannot be billions of years old. Evolution is, or time is the evolutionist pacifier. When you take away time, they scream like a baby with no pacifier. So I cover on my video number 1 some of the scientific evidence. I'm sorry, the sun is burning and it is shrinking. That puts a time limit. How much? I don't know. There's too many variables in there we can't account for. But still, it is obviously burning and it's obviously shrinking. It's been measured. If you want to believe that's been going on for billions of years, at the same time, keeping the balance between the distance to the Earth and the distance to the sun, if you think that balance has been maintained, I think you're stupid. That's not possible. For the sun to be losing mass and the sun to be losing diameter, and to keep the Earth at just the right distance for life to evolve out of the slime. I think the burden of proof is on them to prove that's not a problem.
That's right. That's a challenge that they need to engage and address. The burden of proof is on them. What would be a good response to this as a follow-up? They'll say it isn't shrinking. You just showed through the conventional literature, it looked like, Kent, that indeed it is. It's losing mass. He says it's growing and increasing in luminosity over time. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like I said, as the sun burns, it goes through a cycle of shrinking and swelling and shrinking and swelling. Right. It oscillates because of the nuclear reactions going on inside. But observation tells us, and common sense intuition tells us, the sun is losing material. You see it flying off. The sun is losing material. If somebody wants to say the sun is increasing, where's this matter coming from? How can the sun be increasing in diameter? We know it's not increasing in diameter. It's not increasing in mass. It's losing in both. So again, the burden of proof is on them to prove that's not a problem. They want us to pay for their religion to be taught in school. They want everybody to pay for the evolution religion, and it's nothing but a religion. There's not science. They want us to pay for that to be taught. Okay, well then, I object. You can't show me that the sun has an Earth system and their delicate dance around each other has been going on for billions of years while the sun's losing mass. Show me how this can work.
Right, and your slide there nails it right there. It says that this problem would eventually upset the gravitational balance between Earth and the sun. A heavier sun would suck the Earth in. Well, for evolution to happen, you need an Earth. You need living organisms on the Earth to supposedly evolve from pond scum to people. So, okay, that's a good response, Ken. It's true.
Donny,
time is, yeah.
Donny, if some of your keyboard warriors here want to have a debate on that topic, we'll schedule one for tomorrow or next day. I'll get more details ready and say we'll have a full-fledged debate on it. I've only done 362 debates, Donny. I want to get to 1,000 before I die. I'm 71. Come on, get me some more fast before I die. Okay?
That's right. That's our goal. Get you to 1,000 and get you to 1,000 ASAP. We'll do one nearly every day if we've got enough of those willing to take the challenge. So here you go, Kent, one of your biggest fans, creationist crybaby. Kent, the moon is receding. So this goes back to the recession of the moon. Again, you use this argument. I know you use it in at least one of your recent debates. I'm pretty sure you used them in both, and your interlocutors did not have an answer. So the recession of the moon, the fact that it's moving away from us, this limits the age of the earth. Sure, it doesn't give us exactly 6,000 years, but it limits the age of the earth in the sense it doesn't give the evolutionists their 4.5 billion years to take their goo to you. So Ken, can you speak to that? And you know what? I'll read his comments, see what he's saying. So he's saying the moon is receding at about 3.8 centimeters per year. Since the moon is a certain amount from the earth, isn't this consistent with an earth to moon system billions of years old, Ken?
No. Next question.
Yeah, short and sweet, brother.
Okay, again, it's obvious, it's observable science, and it's obvious intuition. The moon is moving away about, like you said, 3.8 centimeters or 3. What was the number? I'm sorry, 1.5 inches a year. It's been observed. It's measured. The moon is moving away from the Earth. Spaceplace.nasa.gov had an article about it, where the moon's moving away. We know why. As the moon goes around the Earth, it creates a tidal bulge on this planet. That tidal bulge creates a drag as the Earth spins. That tide keeps banging into the continents. It's creating a drag. It slows the Earth down. The energy is transferred to the moon, and the moon is moving further away. It's been observed. It's been measured. It's been proven. The moon is moving away about 1.5 inches a year. I don't know anybody who argues with that. The question is, how could that go on for billions of years? And the answer is, it couldn't. See, we're this whole rabbit trail we're on right now, Donnie. Sorry for my throat. I've been talking for 4 days straight. This is only to rescue the first ingredient they need, which is time. All of this they desperately need billions of years. And they know full well, if you take away time, their whole theory collapses. Now, I would so quickly point out, Your Honor, even with billions of years, their theory collapses. Because time makes things worse. Things fall apart. They age, they degrade. It's the second law of thermodynamics. Things are falling apart, not getting better. So time is not going to help, okay? Time's going to hurt. But the moon is leaving us about 1.5 inches a year. This has been studied. Let's see, this is astronomy.com a couple years ago. No, 2 years ago. Bye-bye moon. Will the moon ever leave its orbit? Spaceanswers.com. Astronomy books are fond of quoting the fact the moon is gradually spiraling away from the Earth. Okay, I agree. Physics.org. Why is the moon leaving us? Oh, there's a go. 10 years ago, did an article. We know why the moon is leaving from lots of different factors involved. The tidal bulge on the Earth creating a drag. It's rated about 4 centimeters a year. Why is the moon getting further from the Earth? Moon is destined to disintegrate. Moon's orbit destined to, okay. Moon, Astro.Cornell University. Is the moon moving away? Yep. The moon is not in a circular path. It's in a slight oval, but the oval is enlarging 3.8 centimeters a year. Okay. Our moon has slowly been drifting away for 2.5 billion years. Well, really, how come they're saying it's 4.6 billion years old? And what started it drifting away? The moon's orbit is increasing 3.8 centimeters a year, Cornell University. See, there's a law called the inverse square law. The Earth and the moon are attracted to each other. If you would bring them into 1/3 the distance, you take that fraction 1/3, inverse it, flip it over, and square it. It would be 9 times the gravitational pull if it were 1/3 the distance. Not 3 times, 9 times the gravitational pull. If you brought the moon into 1/4 of the distance, you take 1/4, flip it over, it's 16 times the pull. Inverse square laws apply with things involving gravity, involving light. Good photographers have to study the inverse square law. How much light do you have and what the distance your camera should be away? It involves magnetism. How strong is the magnetic pull? You get 2 magnets close to each other and they snap together because the pull increases with the inverse square law. It applies to girls. When I'm a certain distance from my wife, I'm attracted. When I'm 1/3 the distance, it's 9 times the pull. At 1/3 again, never mind, it's overcoming. Okay, so the Earth-Moon distance 1,000 years ago was 125 feet closer. No big deal. Million years ago, 28 miles closer. 10 million years ago, 248. This is assuming a linear regression, might be logarithmic, makes it worse for them. Okay. A billion years ago, 28,000 miles closer. 1.4 billion years ago, I think all the experts agree, the evolution of the Luni-Summer major axis collapses a little over a billion years ago. They've known this for 20 years. If you bring the moon in closer, all of a sudden, like two magnets, it snaps together. We take the moon's current rate of recession projected back in time from space.com, the collision between the Earth and moon 1.5 billion years ago. However, the moon was formed 4.5 billion years ago. Well, how do we explain that? Let's just change the rate. You don't know that the rate changed. All we can take is what we observe. We observe it's leaving an inch and a half a year. You do the math on it with what we observe, you got 1.4 billion years. So if you wish to imagine that it's older than that, again, the burden of proof's on you. How can you explain this lunar recession problem? This is just one of 30 ways to prove the Earth is not billions of years old. And again, like I said, this is only the first obstacle they've got. Then you got to get, where did time, space, matter come from? Where did energy come from? Where did the laws come from? It goes on and on and on.
That's right. I think you nailed it. They think time is the hero of the plot for the story of Goo to You evolution. But the fact is, lots of time is still not going to help them because things are breaking down. We've got the law of increasing entropy at work. And so even with lots of time, you just get more degeneration, more extinction, but they need time. They need time to take their bacteria-like organism to biologists. So Kent, that's an excellent response. And you know, in all of your debates and all of your years doing this, I've never seen a real good, convincing response to the recession of the moon and the shrinking sun. To the recession of the moon, they just repeat the argument. And Hugh Ross even used this argument with you years ago in your famous debate with him. They just say, oh, well, it's not linear. And so maybe that can take them back to the 4.5 billion years. But you pointed out, if I understood you correctly, that's not going to save the day for them.
Well, that still begs the question, where did the moon and the Earth come from? How did they get spinning around in orbit? How did they get this nice gravitational balance? I mean, if the moon were closer, the tides would be higher. Way before the orbit collapses, the tides are going to be higher, going to wreak havoc on Earth. So, plus, where did the Earth come from? Where did the moon come from? How did they get so neatly balanced around each other? The moon is essential for the tides to go up and down. That cleanses the beaches and keeps the ocean oxygenated. All kinds of, it's a wonderful, I'm glad we got it up there, okay? It does a lot of wonderful things for the Earth. It almost like it was designed to help us down here on Earth. Almost.
That's what I was gonna, it's almost as if it was fine-tuned for life on Earth, brother.
Right.
Okay, well, here's our next point we're going to get into. I'm going to share screen because in our part one of our response to evolution, it's a thing. But the question is it really a thing? And what do they mean by thing anyways, Kat? So we were responding to some articles to set the foundation for our response to this video. And the video has accumulated millions of views over the years. So that's why I thought it's a good one to respond to. But here's an article. If you just Google evidence for evolution, you'll come up with several technical articles. We responded to a different one last show. So this one, I'm curious, Ken, I think this will help set the foundation, especially for anybody who's new to the creation versus evolution debate. So when we say that evolution is not science, it's pseudoscience, the question really is, what do we mean by evolution? Because notice this, Kent, in their evidence of evolution technical article. When it comes to what is evolution, we understand what they mean by evolution, that whales and banana plants and pine trees are related, theory of common descent. But notice what they say here. Biological evolution is genetic change in a population from one generation to another. The speed and direction of change is variable with different species, lines, and at different times. Okay, so if by evolution you mean genetic change or changes in allele frequencies in populations over generations, well, Kent, you and I don't disagree with change over time. And so what do we mean by evolution, brother? Go ahead.
Oh, you broke up that last little bit there, brother. Your Canadian internet is not doing well. What'd you say?
So I guess Canadian internet. So when it comes to evolution, what do we mean by evolution? We understand that they're kind of trying to redefine things.
Well, this is where they pull the wool over everybody's eyes. There are 6 different meanings or levels or stages to evolution. Okay. Well, first is have to be cosmic evolution. Where did time, space, matter come from? They don't have a good answer for that. So they make up a really dumb idea called the Big Bang. They say, right here, time, space, matter began with the Big Bang. In a fraction of a second, the universe grew from smaller than a single atom to bigger than a galaxy. Stop. That's stupid. Think about that. Everything in the universe fit in a dot smaller than an atom. How dumb can they be? You couldn't squeeze a cup of water into a dot smaller than an atom. You can't even squeeze an atom into a dot smaller than an atom. Can you? They just make the statement and everybody believes it. I'm not going to go on from there. Stop. This isn't science. This is fairy tale. SpongeBob, imagination stuff. It's all it is. You really think all the matter in the universe fit in a dot? The Himalaya mountains all fit in a dot smaller than an atom. All 8 billion people came from that dot. You really believe that? Let's see. At incredible pressure, you can squeeze water 7%. It takes unbelievable amount of pressure to squeeze water. Water won't condense very easily. 7% contraction under, let's see, 1 gigapascal. 3 million atmospheres. The air is pushing down 14.7 pounds per square inch. Multiply that times 3 million. That's what's required to get it to squeeze 7%. So you really think all 333 million gallons or cubic miles of water in the ocean fit in a dot smaller than an atom? They just make a statement and said it did, and the kids believe it and go on. Stop. Don't go on from there. This idea of squeezing the whole earth into that dot, all 1.5 billion cows in the world fit in that dot. So roughly the size of a human being. Oh, it's a little bigger. Okay. So the Big Bang that's only the first of many problems they have. For sake of time here tonight, on my video, I always cover the 6 different meanings of the word. The big one they have problems with, that's cosmic evolution. Number 2 would be chemical evolution. Because their Big Bang theory, which is not even a theory, it's a hypothesis. Okay. It exploded and produced hydrogen gas, and maybe a little bit of helium and some tiny bit of lithium, the first 3 elements on the periodic table. Well, how do you get all the other elements? How do you get gold, silver, and platinum out of hydrogen gas? I'd like to learn how to do that. Then you have to have chemicals have to evolve. Number 2, then you have to have stars and planets evolve. Nobody's ever seen one form. They just say, well, it must have happened because we're here. I'm sorry, that's not science. It's a burden of proofs on them to show it happened. We've never seen a star form. We see stars blow up once in a while. That's a nova or a supernova. We've never seen one form. Never seen a planet form. Do you think dust particles got together and formed this perfect Earth? Nice, smooth, round ball. If you shrank the Earth down to the size of a cue ball, the Earth would be rounder and smoother than the cue ball. I think it's pretty well designed. Then you have to have life gas to get started. This one they skip right over. Notice back on that definition you gave, Donnie, they start with living things. No, stop. You don't start with living things. How did life get started? I want to have an answer for that. Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago, uniform ball of hot rock. Oh, Earth was a ball of molten rock. Earth was a hot ball of rock. This is what they teach. The Earth was a hot ball of molten rock going around the sun. National Pornographic has an article. Earth started off as a hot, viscous ball of rock. Okay, that's their theory. Earth formed, it was 4.6 billion years ago. Earth was a hot ball of rock. Let me blow it up so even guys like Aaron Nelson, who calls himself the sun god, Aaron Ra, he said, no evolutionist ever believed we came from a rock. Aaron, while you're waiting for the barber, read it carefully. The Earth began as a hot ball of rock. You do believe that, okay? 3.9 billion years ago, it cooled down and it began to rain on the rocks. In the oceans, the first living organisms appeared. Again, they just make it like it's a statement. That's not science. Earth started as a hot ball of rock. A few 100 million years it took to reach the melting point of iron. Earth formed 4.54 billion years ago. And let's see. Okay. The Earth was so hot from all the collisions, the rock melted. It was a hot ball of rock. Millions of years of rains created the oceans, and swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. And a complex chemical soup is where we started. 3.5 billion years ago, scientists believe, scientists, got to throw that word in there, the first living organisms appeared. Hot ball of viscous rock, water trapped in the minerals. This is their theory, okay? I just simply point out how dumb this is, that they don't have a problem. They don't have an answer for number 4, organic evolution. How did life get started? Number 5, where's the evidence of an animal change into another kind of animal? We see lots of animals that produce a variety. For instance, now there are 500 varieties of chickens. They might have had a common ancestor called a chicken. And there's over 300 varieties of roses, and they might have had a common ancestor called a rose. But they want to say the chicken and the rose have a common ancestor. I'm sorry, that's not science. That's stupid. I like this. Are there transitional fossils in the room now, Mr. Darwin? They can draw pictures of a T-Rex turned into a chicken. That's not science, that's artwork. You see that one brother with the Flintstones went to visit the Grand Canyon. When it first got started. I love it. See, they say mutations and gene flow are going to cause evolution. No, it's not. There's no known mechanism to change one kind of animal to another. So that's number 5, macroevolution, and it's not science. We cover all that. Then number 6, the Bible says they bring forth after their kind, after their kind, after their kind. It couldn't be more clear. They always make 450 breeds of cows, probably had a common ancestor called a cow. You might get a big cow or a little cow, more milk or less milk, okay? But you're going to get a cow. So, and they go through the different kinds of dogs. Number 6 is what they referred to, trying to sneak in the other 5 under the blanket of variations happen within the kind. Certainly, I agree. That's all we've ever seen. That is where science ends. The first 5 are religious. So when they say, let's talk about evolution, I say, which one you want to talk about? Because there are 6 different meanings to that word. And they always want to talk about number 6. And I agree, it happens. Variations happen, but they're limited. They now have big dogs, little dogs, but they're limited. They're never going to get a dog as big as Texas, I promise you. There's a limit somewhere in there.
That's right. Great rundown, brother. I like that with Aaron Ra. Yeah, while he's waiting at the barber, he can hear once again why they truly do believe they came from a rock. Ken, if you had $1 for every time that you had to show an evolutionist that yes, they do believe they came from a rock, you'd be a trillionaire, at least a billionaire.
I need it too. Send it.
Okay, here we go. Let's get into the video now. And so, Kent, I should say, as we know, especially from the previous video, evolutionists, they tend to say more things wrong in a single sentence than things or words that are in that sentence. So we're probably going to want to pause frequently. So what I'll do, and maybe Joseph can help me out, my good brother, is we'll leave you on unmute because I'll be screen sharing and playing the video, and just give a verbal stop or something like that. Just say anything for me to hear. We'll stop and you'll be able to respond. So, okay. Here we go. Let's get into our video here.
How evolution explains them all so well. First, fossils. The fossil record shows that organisms that lived long ago were different from those.
Donny, there is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils, trillions of them. None of the fossils have a date stamped on them. None of the fossils can talk. They are dead. Okay? There is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils. I've got a whole bunch in our museum. But they just go, they say, well, the fossil record shows. No, stop right there. The fossil record can't show anything except it died. All you know is you find a bone in the dirt, you know the animal died. You couldn't prove it had any children at all. You couldn't prove it had children that lived, and you couldn't prove it had children that lived that were different. This is imagination. Don't let them get by with that. There is no fossil record. The fact that there are fossils at all is indication of a rapid flood, like Noah's flood, buried everything. Fossils aren't forming today. How many animals died in the last 10 years? Billions. Colonel Sanders killed a bunch himself, okay? I ate one today. So, by the way, Donnie, do you know why Baptists eat so much chicken?
Why?
Ever since that rooster betrayed Peter, we've been trying to kill every one of his grandkids. Okay. So no fossils are forming today. Show me where fossils are forming. We find fossils. That's not a problem. When they drilled our well here at Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama, they went down 300 feet and hit seashells. I agree. There are fossils all over the world. There are huge graveyards, thousands actually of graveyards where all the animals are buried together, almost like it was a worldwide flood and they drowned and just the moving currents would automatically swirl them into piles. Watch anytime when there's a flood. It makes little swirls of things and stuff all gathers together. Rotten stuff, dead trees, dead bugs, dead animals. Okay. I think the flood made all the fossils, or nearly all of them. So there is no fossil record. Stop right there. And finding a bone in the dirt that looks a little different than an animal today is not proof it's related or changing into something. All you know is it died. If you find something that there's no modern counterpart to, maybe you found an animal that went extinct. Oh, that's not evolution. So the guy's wrong on that one right there. There is no fossil record. Go ahead.
That's good, Kent. And what I'd like to show as well, when it comes to this argument from the so-called fossil record, notice this. It's the same lines of evidence over and over again, brother. So this is the article that we were looking at. Notice their first line of evidence that they use as well. How do we know that evolution has occurred? The fossil record of change in earlier species. So this is very common, which is why it's important to engage. So let's continue.
Also,
yeah, go ahead.
No, Donny, hang on. It's also their whole thing is predicated on the false idea that there's a geologic column and the layers are different ages. There is no geologic column. They say the top layer is younger. They call it the law of superposition. Okay. If the top layer is younger, I got a simple question. Where'd all that dirt come from? They're saying the Holocene is only 10,000 years old, but the Archean is 2.5 billion. Where was all this dirt sitting around for 2.4999 billion years waiting to land? Get the glare off. Okay. There is no geologic column. Doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Are these layers coming from outer space? Are they being added to the Earth? They're being reshuffled is all they're doing. Shuffling up doesn't change the age of it. If I shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card now younger? If I flip my sand art toys over, which annoy the atheists on purpose, love annoying, are these layers going to be different ages in here? No. They're all in here at the same time. There's no fossil record. There's no geologic column. Stop right there, guys. You're out. Strike three. You're done. Sit down. Okay, go ahead.
What if they were to say, I typically see them say, well, the geological column must fit reality, and your bottom layers, your oldest layers, must have got there first, and then your higher layers got there later, because rocks at the bottom of the so-called geologic column tend to date older than rocks at the top. Kent, what's a good response or a way to engage that? And it's more of an assertion, you know, how true is that statement anyways? That's another question, but that's typically what they argue.
Well, the geologic column made up in late 1700s, early 1800s, that's what influenced Charles Darwin. And I keep asking him, guys, where's all the new material coming from? Is it coming from outer space? And how are you going to date this material? You can date carbon dating with things that were once alive, okay? But even that has some obvious assumptions built into it. But if you watch the video, Experiments in Stratification by the French guy with the name this big, okay? He shows clearly when water's moving sideways back and forth, it forms 8 or 10 layers at a time. The layers form horizontally, not vertically. Just Google Experiments in Stratification, Colorado State University. Did I do something wrong there? Okay. There. So it is baloney to say the top layer is younger, not if they're forming 10 layers at a time sideways. You could have a fossil on top that's older than a fossil in the bottom layer, just by the fact that their layers form sideways. And every time the tide would go up and down during Noah's flood, if the moon were pulling the water up on the earth, which it does now, if the moon was holding the tidal bump, which it does now, and the earth is spinning, the moon is 10 degrees off of our equator. So sometimes it's over the equator, sometimes not. But the tide going up and down would vary throughout the year as the earth is also tilting back and forth. It would really scramble things up in the sedimentation of the earth by the tide. And if the tide were uninterrupted, like it would be with no continent sticking up through the ocean, then the tide could go up and down 200 feet. And a 200-foot tidal change means the water's rushing in and out of that bump every 6 hours, 12.5 minutes. And that's what formed all the layers in 1 year. It was the moon and the tide. Those layers are not different ages. I'm sorry. They say the clams are found at the bottom because clams evolved first. I say, guys, maybe clams are at the bottom because they're already at the bottom when the flood starts. Duh. Of course, they're the first ones buried. That's where they live. It's got nothing to do with evolution. Joseph, are you the one that said you liked it when I say duh? Yeah. Yeah. Duh. Listen, AJ and Great Crybaby, duh. Think about it. They say birds are found on top because birds evolved last. Maybe birds are found on top because they're the last ones to drown in a flood. Don't they fly around till they run out of gas? Then they float because they got hollow feathers, hollow bones. Anyway, so no, there's no geologic column. The layers are all the same age, and there is no fossil record. So let the guy blabber some more.
So this so-called law of superposition isn't exactly a law, is it, Kent? As demonstrated by these experiments.
They started calling it a law, and everybody believed it without stopping to think, no, it's not a law.
Mm-hmm. There's been many flume experiments that have overturned that, in a sense, showing these rapidly formed layers. I'm curious, before we get into him blabbering some more, when it comes to these so-called dates you get from the earlier rocks, when God first created rocks in the beginning, would there not have been a certain amount of, or a diversity of atoms in them? Let's say God would have created a variety of uranium atoms, lead atoms, potassium, argon. So if a scientist came right after creation and dated a rock, would they get billions of years, even though the rock's not billions of years old? Or how would we view that as creationists, Cap?
Well, all these so-called dating methods, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, lead 208, lead 206, carbon 14, carbon 13, all of them were invented in the last 75 years. Okay. Way before that, they made up the stupid geologic column. This became taught as science and accepted science in peer-reviewed journals. So any carbon dates that are found have to match the geologic date. The geologic date is what really takes precedence over anything. But if you want to get carbon dating, there's some obvious assumptions, okay? I cover this. So what about carbon dating on my video number 7 of my series, carbon dating? If you walked into a room and found a candle burning on a table, and I asked you the simple question, when was it lit? How long has it been burning? You say, I don't know. Well, the only thing we can do for science now to see about this, since nobody saw it lit, is do some empirical science. Let's measure it. So we measure the candle and find out it's 7 inches tall. Nobody argues it's 7 inches tall. When was it lit? Well, that doesn't tell me. The only other science I can do, I think, is measure how fast it's burning. Let's say it's burning an inch an hour. You got two facts we all agree on. It's 7 inches tall. It's burning an inch every hour. When was it lit? There's no way to tell me unless you make some assumptions. Has it always burned at the same rate? And how tall was it? You can't know either of those. Now, suppose God created the world and made it perfect, and it had no carbon-14 in the atmosphere. I don't know. Maybe it had some already. The plants are breathing in CO2, making it part of their body. Animals are eating the plants, making it part of their body. You probably got carbon-14 in you and in me. So that's just normal. And the assumption is what we have in us balances with what's in the atmosphere right now. That's not been proven. Okay. But even if it does, it doesn't help their cause any, because they really date the fossils by the layers they come from. The geologic column is God to the atheist. Here it is. Intelligent laymen long suspected circular reasoning. They use rock to date fossils and fossils to date rocks. By rocks, they mean the layers of rock. The geologists never bothered to think of a good reply. Explanations are not worth the trouble. They're arguing in a circle. The age of the rocks is determined by what organisms are found in them. If you find a trilobite, like this fella here, take it to a university and say, how old is it? Without batting an eye, they will say, oh, trilobites lived in the Cambrian era, so that's going to be 400 million years old. Trilobites. They won't bat an eye. That's what they're taught. Oh, 488.3 billion years ago. Or 0.4883 billion years ago. They find trilobites still alive. They find human shoe print where a guy stepped on and smashed one. They find trilobites that are 4 feet high, bigger than an umbrella. So I cover all that in my video series. All the animals lived at the same time. There is no geologic column. There is no fossil record. They date radiometric dating is all based on the geologic column. Radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. I agree. More bad news for radiometric dating. University of North Carolina article about that. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off on a rabbit trail. I want to listen to this guy blabber some more so I can rest my voice. Go ahead.
Very good, brother. Excellent answer. Okay, I think we'll make some clips so far out of some of these responses. So Kent, let's get back to what our friend here is saying at CrashCourse. So, okay, just let me know when you want to respond again, and I will mute or unmute Kent.
Those that we see today. Sounds obvious, but 200 years ago, it seemed a little bit crazy. When scientists started studying dinosaur fossils in the 1820s, they thought that all dinosaurs were basically giant iguanas. That's why the first fossil dinosaur was named Iguanodon. It wasn't until the fossils of two-legged dinosaurs started showing up in the 1850s that scientists had to grapple with the idea that organisms of the past were somewhat similar to ones today, like dinosaurs were to reptiles, but many of them took on a diversity that's barely recognizable to us. And all those ancient, not really iguanas were all extinct, either dying out completely or evolving into organisms that survive today, like birds. Fossils make it clear that only...
Wait. Stop. This guy's teaching a class teaching that dinosaurs evolved into birds. Let me say it real simple, small words. That's stupid. Stupid. Nobody's ever seen any animal produce a different kind of animal as a baby. Reptiles have thousands of differences between birds. All we've ever seen is birds make baby birds. No exceptions. Our chickens are in there laying eggs all the time. Every time comes out a chicken. No exception. Yeah. So he just makes a statement and goes right on. Dinosaurs turned to birds. And the average kid's going to believe it. Like, whoa, wow. It's got to be true. No, it's not true. The word dinosaur was made up in 1841 by Sir Richard Owen. The word means terrible lizard. They knew from looking at the bones, these are reptiles. I think everybody agrees dinosaurs would fit in what man calls the reptile family. Keep in mind, we are putting our classification system on these animals. They don't care how we classify them. They don't even know we're doing it. We decided to put dinosaurs in the reptile category. They don't care or know. We decided to put cows in one category and sheep in a different category. They don't care. We have cows and sheep and donkeys all free up on the North 40. When the cows look for a mate, they look for another cow every time. No exceptions. And keep in mind, the cows don't even know what they look like, but they know what to look for in a mate. They've never seen themselves. Interesting. God said they'd bring forth after their kind. That's all we've ever seen. So if he wants to make a wild statement that reptile dinosaurs turned to birds, you're either lying or you're stupid. I'll debate you anytime. Call 855 Big Dino, extension 4. Joseph Bookham. Okay.
That'd be an excellent debate. So Ken, evolutionists, they love their taxonomy. They love their classification systematics. And so what's a good response to a proponent or a guardian of common descent that would argue, well, birds are dinosaurs and dinosaurs evolved into birds because birds today, when you compare them to any other creature on the planet, including fossil creatures, birds look most similar to a theropod dinosaur. What would be a good response to that, Ken?
We have a turtle that looks just like a Volkswagen. The fact that they're saying a bird looks like a theropod dinosaur, and they call that science, the fact that they look alike, got two legs, it's dumb. There are thousands of things that have to change, from cold-blooded to warm-blooded, from scales to feathers. The reptile lung is totally different than the bird lung. There are thousands of, the eyes are different. They're just dreaming. I think the demons and Satan are making up these stories and seeing if humans are dumb enough to believe it. And they're having a party laughing about, oh, they believe it. Look at those guys believe the earth is flat. Ha ha, we fooled them. Okay. They've got to be laughing at humans for believing the dumbest things, that they come up with these wild ideas. Okay.
And their goal is to keep people away from believing the gospel, the saving gospel of Jesus Christ.
Well, God said 20 times in the first 7 chapters of the Bible, they will bring forth after their kind. And then they're going to argue what's a kind. They know what their kind is. Let them loose in the woods. They already know. They don't even think about, our sheep don't think about looking at the donkeys and say, oh, wow, that'd be a good husband. No. They're afraid the thing's going to kick them in the head. Okay, so they stay away from it. So there are no exceptions. And again, our classification system is something we impose on the animals and plants, and they don't care. They don't even know we're doing it. So they say, well, that's a brand new species. It's the same kind of animal. There are 339 recognized breeds of dogs that probably had a common ancestor called a dog. And they're limited. Small dog, big dog, but they're never going to get out of the dog kind. Now there's 26 different definitions of the word species. Nobody's got a good definition of species either if they want to argue about that, because they'll say, what's a kind? Okay, you tell me what's a species. And why would that matter? Turn the animals loose. They know what to look for every time. Show me where one went into what you think is enough to show evolution, where an animal produced babies that were different enough that you say, see, that's evidence it's changing to something else. Show me that. And you'd have to have trillions of those to make these wild changes they put on our charts. They teach the kids in school, all the animals in the world came from a protozoa or an amoeba or a bacteria, single-celled creature. You think a whale came from a single-celled creature? Single-celled creatures don't have lungs, don't have flippers, don't have skin like the whale, don't have eyes, don't have ears. There's a lot of changes, okay? It's imagination. This isn't science, that's all.
That's right. Man's classification system is not the same as God's classification system. So a lot of
it might be the same in some areas. I don't think the animals care. I don't think God cares. I think God's classification system came first, bring forth after their kind. Show me where that didn't happen.
Right. I think you've made a good point over the years that when it comes to classification, you got kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. At some levels, it's the family. At other levels, it might be the genus. So, okay, Kent, very good. Let's continue seeing what he's got to say. So we'll share screen again. And I like how you point out the assertions when they just say something. Birds came from dinosaurs and then quickly move on. It's very important that we call those things out. Okay, here we go.
Explain the origin of these new kinds of organisms. For instance, fossils taught us used to walk. Whales.
Hang on. Did you notice he used the word kinds? New kinds of organisms.
Yeah.
See, it's okay for them to use it. The title of this is Evolution a Thing? Is a kind a thing? Yeah. We know what a kind is. Let me call up the definition of the word species, and I'll show you how they define species. Let's see. What happened here? Did I get the wrong one? Oh, here we go. Okay. And this drives them crazy. It's not actually a drive. It'd be a short putt. Okay. Definition of species. Here we go. Back to that one. Here. I like PowerPoint with all the hyperlinks, brother. There you go. What's a species? Species defined as a group of organisms that can reproduce naturally with one another and create fertile offspring. But that's what God said. They bring forth, I have babies after their kind. Species, a kind or sort. Merriam-Webster dictionary used the word kind. Synonyms for species. Oh, what is it? A kind. Biological definition of species. Group of organisms that share genetic heritage, able to interbreed and create fertile offspring. That's what the Bible says they can bring forth. Okay. But God said they'll bring forth after their kind. After their kind. After their kind. It has to do with bringing forth, i.e. having babies, okay? That's all we've ever seen. So I think I show on here someplace where they have 26 different definitions of species. Let me get up there. To this day, scientists struggle with what's a species from Scientific American. The debate over species definition is far from over. Let's see, right here. There's no general agreement among biologists on what species are. At last count, there were 26 published concepts in circulation. So they don't know either. So why are we teaching their religion and not mine in the schools? Theirs is a religion, nothing else. Go ahead, Don.
That's right. That's right. Excellent points, Kat. Okay, here we go. All right.
Are cetaceans, a group of mammals that includes porpoises and dolphins, and biologists long suspected that whales descended from land mammals, partly because some modern whales still...
Donnie, we've been at this an hour, and we've covered 1 minute of this guy's blabber, okay? Send me the link to that guy, and I'll just hit pause every word. We got to stop every word, okay? He said, just make a statement, whales descended from land-dwelling mammals. Nobody's ever seen a whale produce a non-baby whale, ever. He's imagining this. Whales always make baby whales. If he knows of an exception to that, I'd like to see it. I did a whole section against AJ on whale evolution. There is no evidence of any animal changing to a new kind. So he just made the statement, moved right on. I guess I got it in here somewhere. Embryology, is it in here? Whales. But I'm sorry. My throat's about gone, Donnie, if we can take up another time. But we took 2 programs to cover 3 minutes. Yeah. This guy, I will debate him anytime. I'll debate him every day for the next month, if that'll help him. 1 word at a time, probably. He's not going to make those statements and dance on and leave me in the dust. I'm going to stop him. He said, whales come from land-dwelling. No, show me this. That's propaganda. That's not science.
Don't worry, Kent. We can turn this into a series that we do right up until the second coming of Christ. Okay. Or when he finally says, you know what? Okay, I'll debate you, Kent. We'll make sure it's a fairly moderated debate as well. And so if you don't mind.
I don't even know his name or where he's at, but can you get a hold of him and challenge him?
Yeah, I could try. Actually, a few people in the chat said that they can try getting a hold of him as well. So we've done 2 parts already, both an hour long. So if he sees it, let's
now, keep in mind, he is not teaching a biology course. He's teaching a propaganda course. It's not biology. Okay?
That's right. That's right. So, brother, if you don't mind, maybe we'll wind down, just do 2 or 3 more minutes and get a couple of these audience questions. We can do rapid fire, and then we'll call it a night. Okay, Kent, appreciate it. So, Apologetics 101, question for Kent. How do you respond to an evolutionist who claims that evolution does claim that things evolve into the same kind because they reclassify a modern animal by its ancestry?
I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking there, but they change the border. They move the goalpost with evolution all the time to say this is a new kind. And keep in mind, no fossils are going to count. In an honest court of law, if somebody brought a bone in and said, Your Honor, this bone turned into this animal. Stop. You don't know this bone had any children. None, let alone different children. So don't let them get by with that. So how do you respond to this thing is blocking my view here. The claim that things evolve into the same kind. I would say the Bible says, can you move it up just about a couple inches, brother? That's all we've ever seen. Animals and plants produce the same kind of offspring, just like God said would happen. So they reclassify by its ancestry. How do you know what its ancestry is? I'd like to see how they found that out. They imagine that it evolved from something in a lower strata, and there's no geologic column, there's no fossil record, and no bones count at all. So I'd like to see how they prove that.
Well, we just finished a series with Carl Werner. He spent years going out and investigating these fossils, and he discovered countless living fossils, including mammals living with the dinosaurs, which is what we'd expect. But the evolutionists, they're so biased, full of propaganda, that even though the creature looks exactly the same, hasn't changed at all in supposedly millions of years, they give it a different species name to try and deceive the children, deceive people into thinking, okay, these creatures look the same, but they're a different species. So it's just evolutionary propaganda is what it is, brother. Okay, here's a question from, this was a good one that came in near the beginning, and actually maybe I lost it. So the question, Kent, was from someone in the chat wondering if gene duplication. So I lost the question. I apologize, but I do remember what it was. So they're asking if gene duplication, a region of the genome is duplicated, is a way for evolution to press forward? Is it a way to add new information?
It doesn't add information to duplicate what's already there. If I said, here, I'll give you this book, a copy of this book. No, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you 7 copies of this same book. It's not new information. It's the same stuff over and over again. Show me where new information was created. They can't, because it doesn't happen. Duplicating making a mistake. It's a typographical error. That's what all mutations are. Nobody's ever seen a beneficial mutation. All mutations are harmful, fatal, or neutral. And how many trillion mutations would you have to change a protozoa into a whale or a human? It doesn't happen. It's imagination. And if you want to believe that, that's fine. I don't care what you believe. But don't call it science, and don't put it in our public school classrooms and make all of us pay to have that propaganda taught. Go start a private school, teach your evolution religion to whoever wants to pay and come learn it. But I'm going to fight this until I die, Donnie. Then my videos are going to keep going after I die. So, yay.
That's right. That's right. They're going to spread wide and far. Okay, here, we'll wrap it up, I guess, with this last question here from your biggest fan. A show responding to evolution is simply not complete, right, Kent? Without Gracious Crybaby. So, Kent, you've presented a fossil record based on the flood. So what are you talking about? I think he's trying to say, oh, we do believe in the fossil record. What are your thoughts, Kent?
I was going to ask him, what are you talking about? Oh. There are fossils in the ground, trillions of them. If you want to count diatoms, probably quadrillions, okay? And lime, different things, rocks that are made up really of 100% pure fossils, okay? So there are lots of fossils in the ground. I think there's a little bit of sorting based upon common sense reasons, like maybe they're sorted based upon their habitat. If there was a worldwide flood, the tide going up and down, back and forth, would tend to sort them by their body density. Just like if you shake up this thing, it tends to separate the layers by density. Apparently the sand, the blue sand, the black sand, and the white sand are different density. I don't know. Didn't build the thing. But they're going to settle in layers by density. I think clams would tend to be found in the same layer because they have similar body density. Birds might be found in a different layer because of their body density. So I think the flood is the only good explanation for why there's any sorting at all. But the sorting is not uniform everywhere. All kinds of tangled up messes occur. In a flood, in a disaster, the little bit of sorting, if there's no time, they just all get tangled up together.
Okay, Ken, very good. I appreciate it. Let's give your voice a rest, brother. You did a good job. This was a fun second part to your response, our response here to Crash Course. So, brother, any final words, final thoughts you wanted to leave us with before we shut her down?
Has anybody transcribed what he did where you can see the words he's saying and then we'll stop that way? That would be better. There's probably a program to transcribe it, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we can definitely do that. Maybe if someone wants to help me out with that, we can get the full transcription and then we can just go through word by word and reference the video, but say, hey, this is what he's saying, and then we can respond.
Well, see, this is like under Adolf Hitler, they used propaganda. They had keywords they would say all the time, like Jews are an inferior species. Like there are different species. They're human. Come on. So you got to take word by word with what they're saying here. It's nothing but propaganda.
That's right, brother. Okay, well, I appreciate you doing this. The hour's flown by. Let's put the challenge out there again to the evolutionists in the chat. Anybody who wants to defend the idea that they're related to a banana plant and a whale, reach out to either myself or Joseph, and we'll set up some debates, because Kent, we got to get you to debate 1,000, brother.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Okay, God bless you, Kent. We'll let you enjoy the rest of your night. We'll see you later, and I will stick around for a little bit and go over some reminders and also some announcements. Apologetics 101 says, great discussion. I appreciate that, Brian. We want to do more of these live responses and also rebuttals to these videos that are claiming to have evidence for evolution. I've been doing one responding to stated clearly on endogenous retroviruses. And so if those in the audience have not yet seen it, do check it out. I've done 2 parts and I'm currently working on the third part. Third part is going to be technical. The whole series has been technical. Endogenous retroviruses is a technical topic, so it requires a sophisticated rebuttal. But part 3, I'm going to be focusing on the origin of retroviruses in general. Okay, so if you're not yet caught up on that series, please check that out. Doki says, super chat came in about Carl Werner. Okay, let me scroll up and see, since when I'm screen sharing, Unfortunately, I can't see the chat at the same time. So let's see here. Super chat. Yeah, if you haven't seen the show or series that I've done with Dr. Carl Werner, we have, so Monkey Man makes me laugh. So watch the series of living fossils, and Dr. Carl Werner shows through the textbooks, the museum representations, you see dinosaur depictions, but very rarely, if ever, do you see depictions of these mammals and these birds and these other creatures that we know for a fact lived alongside these dinosaurs. We also understand that there's tons of what's called living fossils, creatures that supposedly haven't changed in tens of millions of years. Coelacanth is one of them. And it's funny because though oftentimes the evolutionist likes to ask, oh, why don't we find humans and dinosaurs in the same layers? Or why don't we find mosasaurs and blue whales in the same layers? And it's like, supposedly coelacanth went extinct 50 or 60 million years ago and hasn't been found in the fossil record all the way through the so-called geological column, but then we find them today swimming around in the ocean. So that means coelacanth has coexisted not only with humans, but other creatures that live in the water, like mosasaur or whales or sharks or fish. But yet we don't have any evidence for that if you're just going to look strictly at the rock strata and the fossils. And so it's simply a fallacious argument. It's a real major issue for those that want to believe they're related to bacteria-like organisms. Oh, appreciate that, Doki. $2 super chat. Thank you for the support. Carl Werner's fossil chart show 0 intermediates. Yeah, and I'd recommend the program we did with Helmut Welk, about a 2-hour program. Helmut gave a fantastic presentation on the so-called best examples of a transitional form. This includes Archaeopteryx, the whale series, Tiktaalik. We discussed the true tetrapod foot tracks that were found in Poland that predate Tiktaalik, the so-called famous fisherpod, by 15 or 20 million years, roughly. And these are true tetrapods that are living before Tiktaalik, which is supposed to be a transition from fish to land-dwelling tetrapod. Okay, and so what we see is overlap, coexistence, intermingling. This is what we see in the fossil record, and this is what we would expect to see in the fossil record if if creation is true. Okay, so Andrew Cumming asks, good question. How many types of coelacanths do you think exist or have existed? Well, I believe that that it's pretty clear that God loves diversity, loves variation. So he created the biological world with a lot of diversity, with a lot of variation. A lot of people forget that it is not until the ark, Noah's flood, that 2 or 7 of every kind, or 14, are brought to the ark. Okay, so we do have this massive bottleneck at the well, 4,500 years ago. But at creation, God would have created populations of animals in fully working, fully functional ecosystems. And so we'd find a diversity of creatures. He didn't just create 2 dogs, 2 fish, 2 cats. He would have created a diversity of creatures. And this is also where we can make a prediction. And so, for example, the Bible claims to be the history book of the universe. And the Bible says that God created 2 people, Adam and Eve. And so right off the bat, what this does is it restricts levels of genetic diversity. But the Bible is clear that God creates animals in populations, not just 2 of every kind, but in populations. And so we would expect overall, there's always exceptions to the rules. We would expect animals to have higher levels of genetic diversity and humans to have lower levels of genetic diversity. Well, what they discovered was that humans have incredibly low levels of genetic diversity. All humans are nearly identical in their genetics, 99.99999% the same. But in animals, in the wild, in terms of the biological world, animals have much more diversity. Okay, from my understanding, there's more diversity between lions, tigers, and cats than between humans and chimpanzees. And as a creationist, we would argue that humans and chimpanzees are not related through common ancestry. So there's a lot of diversity in the biological world. And remember, the flood bottleneck was a one generation bottleneck that was followed up by rapid and exponential population growth. And so most of that original diversity, the design diversity, would have been retained. Okay, it's not a long-term bottleneck like the evolutionists require in the so-called out of Africa population bottleneck. So let's see the questions we have here. Monkey Man says, Tiktaalik is just a very useful fossil analog for its transitional between lobe-finned fish and later tetrapods. But what we can best conclude is that we simply have interesting creatures, mosaics, living alongside, living at the same time as amphibians, as fish, okay, as true tetrapods, because we find, again, true tetrapod foot tracks predating Tiktaalik, okay? And so what we find, again, is the coexistence of these creatures. We find interesting mosaics in the design world. I've given full presentations on this. And we find interesting mosaics in the biological world that are coexisting with creatures that supposedly they've evolved from. Fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal. Okay? But we see this coexistence here in the fossil record. So let's see some more questions. CrashCourse here. He was moving into, and he briefly discussed whale evolution, the whale series. So I've got plenty of slides, as a matter of fact, on the so-called whale series. And so here represents their series, roughly their series, where you've got Indohyus, Pakicetus, Ambulocetus, Basilosaurus, modern cetacea like blue whales. Okay. And there's other ones, and Rhodocetus is another one. And so if you actually look here, going from Pakicetus to a blue whale over time, this is a size comparison. So here's Pakicetus, small mammal creature, land creature, and here's blue whale. Here's a blue whale. Now, I understand it's not this direct line, okay, and its population's evolving over time, but the amount of changes that would have to take place in order for whale evolution to be true. I mean, fully aquatic whales vary in a great multitude of ways. Blowholes are one distinction. Okay, blowholes are located at the top of a whale's head. And also whales have flukes that are not at all like the tails you would find in something like Pakicetus or Indohyus or just a land-dwelling mammalian creature. Okay, these flukes are well designed and ideal for movement in the ocean. Okay, so there's massive changes that would need to take place. And when you actually examine, which I've done in a presentation, I put out a detailed video on whale evolution. We've put out a separate video addressing the so-called pseudogenes and also the arguments from embryological development. So I've been quite comprehensive in terms of the whale series. Okay, so if you actually examine all of these different creatures, you can find that you've got separate kinds, unrelated, fully terrestrial when it comes to Pakicetus and Indohyus, primarily terrestrial when it comes to Rhodocetus, when it comes to Ambulocetus, and then you got your fully aquatic. So you do find a lot of gaps in these creatures. Okay, Indohyus and Pakicetus, just small land mammals. Ambulocetus, Myocetus, Cuchacetus, and Rhodocetus were amphibious mammals, well designed for the transitional environment between sea and land. Ambulocetus is a major one that they like to look to as a so-called transitional form. Lived about 48 million years ago, according to the evolutionary story. Here we go, Ambulocetus. And Ambulocetus was, based on the data that we have, wasn't really all that great in the water, nor was it all that great on land. And so it was a strong swimmer, but not necessarily fast or efficient, as it wasn't just perfectly designed for that environment. Okay. On land, which it could move around, it was awkward with legs that basically widen out to the sides and a belly that nearly dragged on the ground. Okay. The snout was elongated and heavy, it probably was pretty challenging to raise its head. So the point I'm trying to make is it was perfectly suited for that specific environment, where it lived in partially freshwater environments, where it hung out in the shadows to find prey. And so I view Ambulocetus, I think the evidence suggests that Ambulocetus was basically the mammal version of a crocodile. Okay. And it appears that your pre-flood world, we see this in the fossil record, had a lot of diversity, had a lot of variation. And so this isn't a transitional from walking whales to fully aquatic whales. No, Ambulocetus sounds nothing more than a mammalian ambush predator with a long snout, much like alligators, who we understand like to stay hidden and submerged in water as they sneak up on their prey and make their attack. Okay. And so this is why it's important to note that the fossil record, fossils are fickle and they can tell any story that you want them to. It's arbitrary. It's subjective. They like to line things up. Okay. That's why we find so many inconsistencies and misrepresentations in these fossil reconstructions that you find of whales. Okay, notice this. And Carl Werner and I discussed this. The discoverer of Rhodocetus even made a glaring admission. He said, I speculated that it might have had a fluke. I now doubt that Rhodocetus would have had a fluke tail. Okay, Basilosaurus. So I've gone through all of these, and even the so-called vestigial whale pelvic bones, we understand, play a key role in reproduction. So there's a function there. So in a nutshell, we have the main candidates, the icons that we can fully explain from a creationist perspective. Okay, so I just briefly wanted to cover those slides, and also let's see what the chat is saying, and maybe I'll find my other slides on ancestry that I wanted to touch on. Okay, let's see here. Simple Grace says, Donnie, is it okay if I reach out to Hank Green on your behalf? Yeah, feel free to do so. If he'd like to engage in a formal or informal debate with Kent, we can do that. I think that would be fun. So if you feel like you want to reach out, feel free to do so. Sydney Raptor says, you are misrepresenting transitional fossils. There is no line drawn. There cannot be one where one species changes into another. Many fossils show differences. The point is, when you actually examine the fossil record, you look at the bigger picture, what we find is stasis, okay, right, with these living fossils that we've done a whole series on. You find coexistence, intermingling. And so at best, your so-called argument from transitional fossils is agnostic. Because again, our creationist model, I've presented on this, if we start from the Bible, God claims that man is made in his image. We're made in the image of God. And so we should be able to get an idea or a sense into how God created the biological world based on the way we design things. Okay. It turns out that human engineers build in homologous patterns. You can take cars from separate car companies around the globe. Okay. You can take Honda, Civic, Volkswagen. In Europe, you can take cars from here, Canada, and the United States, like Chrysler, Ford, GM, and you're going to find all kinds of similarities. Okay, it doesn't mean that they all share a common Arctic ancestor. Point is, humans build in homologous patterns. Humans also naturally, okay, they're not intentionally doing it, but humans naturally build in hierarchical patterns where you have sedans sharing a lot more with a hatchback than they do with a semi-tractor trailer or a boat or an airplane. So there's this natural nested hierarchy in the same way that there's a natural hierarchy in the biological world where you have humans looking more similar to chimpanzees than humans do to, let's say, a dog or a fish or a bacteria. So there's this natural hierarchy. Similarity does not equate relationship. Similarity does not demand common descent. Okay. And when it comes to so-called transitional forms, well, we as human engineers design all sorts of interesting vehicles, for example, or tools. Okay. In terms of vehicles, you have the crossover SUV, which blends the features of an SUV and a van. The military has invented the military amphibious assault vehicle, which isn't really good in just the water or good just on land. It is good for that transitional environment from sea to land. If you want a vehicle that's good just for the sea, then you have a military ship, or for the land, you have a tank. But for that transitional environment from sea to land, you have a military amphibious assault vehicle, in the same way that God designed creatures like Tiktaalik, which is suited for its environment, and like Ambulocetus, which again is suited to its environment. So hopefully that helps. Okay, let's see what other questions we've got here in our awesome chat. Kakarot, good to see you. Kakarot and I engaged in at least 2, I think, discussions or debates in the past. I see Kakarot talking about Herman May's. Herman May's main argument has to do with nested hierarchies in neutral variation. Evolutionary scientists like Herman May's, they start from a junk DNA starting point, okay, where they believe that the majority of the genome is junk, represents broken genes, viral fossils, and supposedly these genetic markers form hierarchies, okay? But the creationists, we predict design variation, designed or functional variation, rather than just neutral variation. And so these hierarchies are then, if that is true, we can make predictions, are explained as hierarchies by design due to function, rather than hierarchies by descent, okay, due to evolutionary leftovers, let's say. Okay, good chat today. I hope people, let's see this. Ian DaCosta. Genetic entropy must be a myth if evolution is true, as the theory depends on increasing complexity, but can we observe this? Yes. Genetic entropy is basically the idea, the reality that most mutations, the majority of mutations, are deleterious or slightly deleterious. Natural selection is weak, it's limited. Selection is a fine-tuning mechanism that keeps a species as strong as it can be. Okay? You can think of it almost as natural elimination. So it's not actually making things better. Mutations are supposed to add the novel genetic variation for selection to act upon. But again, the majority of mutations are slightly deleterious. They're nearly neutral or low impact, so selection can't see them. So genetic entropy is the concept that most mutations can't be seen by selection, but they're still slightly deleterious. So they build up over time. They're subject to genetic drift. Selection can't see them, and so populations degenerate over time. Selection can only see the best so-called beneficial mutations, even though your best so-called beneficial mutations turn out to be reductive. They're functionally compromising 2 organisms. They are at the result of the degradation of pre-existing systems. Okay, or proteins being damaged or degraded. And so that's not going to counterbalance the damage being done through the relentless influx of low impact, slightly deleterious or nearly neutral mutations. And so they build up over time. The question to the evolutionists is, what type of selection can you provide us that can see these slightly deleterious mutations that are building up over time? Because by the time the damage is noticeable, the damage is population wide. Okay, let's say you have a room full of 100 people. Well, everybody in that room is multiply mutant, with some maybe a little more mutant than others. Okay, so let's say you take the 50 most mutants, worst mutants in the room of 100 people. Okay, selection removes them from the equation. Have you solved the problem? Have you answered the challenge? No, because now you're just left with 50 people, 50% of that room, that are more mutant than the previous generation, because kids are slightly more mutant than their parents and their grandparents and their great-great-grandparents. And so the population as a whole is degrading, even though selection may be removing some of the worst mutants from the equation. The problem is everybody's multiply mutant. And so you can only remove the worst, but what's left is still more mutant than the previous generation. So every generation is more mutant because they've accumulated more deleterious mutations. And so there's no way to solve the problem. There's no way to solve the challenge, because there is no kind, or there is no type of selection that can save the day for common descent. Okay. So Andrew Cumming makes a good point here. Bacteria apparently aren't experiencing it. Well, they are, because Lenski's long-term experiment has actually demonstrated reductive evolution in bacteria. In every single case in Lenski's experiment, the genes were what? They were deleted, broken, downregulated, or eliminated. And that is akin to removing weight from your car to temporarily get better gas mileage. Let's say I wanted to get better gas mileage in my car. So I thought, okay, let's start removing things from the car. Removing weight. Okay, remove the side mirrors, remove some of the seats in the car, remove just some weight. You're basically destroying the car, but now the car is lighter. And so you're going to get better gas mileage. But this isn't telling you how the car was built, how the car was designed. It's actually just a short-term or a narrow increase in fitness, if you want to use that word. Okay, because overall you're destroying the car to get that temporary benefit. And that's what we see in Lenski's experiment. And so the best way to speed up growth in Lenski's long-term E. coli evolutionary experiment was actually to eliminate genes. And so his bacteria, they've become lazy. They've lost a lot of genes. They've shrunk in functional genome size. They're backed up into a corner, and basically necessary genes in his bacteria, they were removed since those genes slowed down the bacteria. So that goes back to the car analogy. Yeah, temporarily you're going to get better gas mileage, but it's at the expense of destroying the car. And so these bacteria are being degraded, they're being destroyed, they're being eliminated in terms of pre-existing systems and genes. It's not making them better. And so yes, bacteria are also subject to genetic entropy or genetic degeneration, as Lenski's bacteria have experienced reductive evolution. Okay. And so genetic degeneration is greatly supported by the data. Okay. All right, let's see what else we got here. And maybe I do have time to go through. Let's see here. Rock and woodworks. How do you attach the concept of mutation? So again, mutations, overwhelmingly deleterious. Most mutations are only slightly deleterious. Again, you do get big mutation. Let's say you have a zebra that's born with one leg shorter than the others. Okay, that's a big enough mutation for selection to see. And as a result, that zebra is going to be the first to be eaten by the lion. Okay, so yes, these big mutations, a single point mutation can kill a person. And so there's not going to be reproduction. Genes are not going to be passed on. Selection is basically just differential reproduction. Who's reproducing the most? Who's passing on their genes? Who's having the most kids? And so, yeah, selection is going to see the big mutations. We don't have an issue with that. Selection may even amplify the best beneficial mutation. And yet most beneficial mutations you can point to and that you study and analyze are actually reductive at the genotype. Okay. They are functionally compromising to organisms. But even if there were 10 or 20 or even 100 truly beneficial mutations with no reductive effects, well, still, that's not going to counterbalance the damage. It's only ever going to result in shrinking functional genome sizes like we see in Lenski's bacterial experiment. Okay, it's never going to take fish to fisherman. It's never going to take goo to you. It's never going to take bacteria-like organisms into biologists, because there is no trade-off. There is no trade-off. That trade-off is simply going to result in a loss of total functionality. So yeah, unfortunately for the evolutionists, most mutations are deleterious. They're damaging, they're disease causing. It should be a combination of both, as recombination is continuous across generations. Yeah, recombination, you have the chromosomes line up, they exchange genetic information. This is how you get novel chromosomal combinations every single generation. Okay, and this is how we generate diversity. This is why a couple could hypothetically have 1 million kids and every single child will be different, because there's pre-existing variation, there's recombination, we all have DNA differences, and those genetic variants are recombined, they're shuffled or scrambled to get new variations, okay? But that's not actually removing any of the long-term damage that's building up through deleterious mutation accumulation, low impact deleterious mutation accumulation. Ian Chen, my good man, appreciate the support all the way from Australia. And so he says, it's been a while, haters of the Chen. People love you, Ian. People are chanting your name. They want to see you back in the debate octagon. He says, but Donny and I will set up some more entertainment for you all. Stay tuned. Yes, we are currently setting up a debate between Ian Chen and T-Rock on whether or not dinosaurs and man coexisted. And then around 3 to complete the debate trilogy between Hovind and Chen. So Hovind v. Chen, round 3. And so that should be fun. That'll probably be in September with T-Rock. We're hoping for August. Okay, let's see here. Monkey Man. Donny, I'ma be real. I appreciate that. We want real here in the chat. You have been told to your face countless times that mutations are not deleterious. And those same people have been told countless times to their face that yes, even the conventional literature agrees that most mutations are deleterious, but most mutations are not deleterious enough to where selection can see them. And so they're only slightly deleterious. Therefore, they are low impact. They're nearly neutral. And so they build up over time and they degenerate over time. And maybe I can even showcase that a bit here in some slides. Let's see. So again, the population is multiply mutant. And so even if selection is removing the worst mutants from the equation, those that are left are still more mutant than the previous generation. And so, as Kent says, it helps when you ask the question in the order that I have them in my slides. And so I know I've got some slides here, I think from the boot camp, actually, directly from the conventional literature, showing that, yes, indeed, most mutations are slightly deleterious, okay? And so, and the mutation rate is high. So not only is selection limited in what it can see, the mutation rate is high. It's about 100 new mutations per person per generation. Okay, since they're slightly deleterious, they're nearly neutral. And your rescue mechanisms, junk DNA, mutation count mechanisms, synergistic epistasis, they've been engaged and they've been countered. And so I might not be able to find the slide in time that I'd like to see, but genetic degeneration does continue to be a problem. We've discussed Lenski's experiment, how he's now observed reductive evolution in his bacteria. We understand that diseases are accumulating as well. Okay, so I'm opening a separate presentation as I do want to show this source. So this is my presentation on ancestry. Notice this from Kitely and Lynch. In summary, so this is from the conventional literature, Monkey Man. in summary, the vast majority of mutations are deleterious. This is one of the most well-established principles of evolutionary genetics, supported by both molecular and quantitative genetic data. Okay. So yes, the vast majority of mutations are deleterious. And as a matter of fact, the more functional the genome is, the more deleterious these mutations are as well. Okay. And so that's another major issue and challenge for the evolutionary community, is the fact that we have genome-wide activity. Okay, so we've discovered that the majority of the genome is active, about 60% is transcribed, about 80% is active. And the evolutionary community, they want to argue, proponents, militant defenders of common descent, they want to argue that the majority of that activity is spurious or it's just noise. But there's a problem there, because there's energy requirements. Every time you add a single nucleotide to a growing RNA chain, you're consuming energy. You're consuming ATP. Okay. And so if the majority of this activity is just noise or it's just spurious, then that is a waste of energy and resources for the cell. And so if evolution is true, there should be a form of selection. There should be a way over the millions of years for all of this noise, all of this junk, these evolutionary leftovers to be removed from the equation, as that is going to help with the clutter. It's going to help with that noise. That noise isn't good, as again, it would be incredibly wasteful of energy and resources. And so that suggests that the activity is beneficial activity. Okay. Because that's a lot of transcripts. And I've done an entire presentation. I've done debates on junk DNA, and I've gone over the many other reasons why the majority of that activity must be beneficial. Okay. Let's see here. Something about Jason Lyell. Can you speak on Dr. Jason Lyell's video? The secret code of creation. Well, I will say this. We have Dr. Lyell coming on soon. And so I'm excited for this one. Dr. Lyell will be here with Sam and I, Science Confirms Biblical Creation. And we are going to be discussing for 2 hours live. We are going to be engaging challenges. We are going to be engaging the critics. We're going to be doing this live in order that the critics can have an opportunity in the chat to provide their best arguments. We're going to be talking about the James Webb Space Telescope and Dr. Lyell's predictions and how they have come true. They've been confirmed. And so I'm really excited for this one. This is going to be good. We're going to be tackling distant starlight. We're going to be putting that one to bed. We're going to be discussing dating methods. And so we are going to be comprehensive in terms of engaging dating methods. We're going to be providing just undeniable evidence for a young Earth. And so make sure you're here for that. That is going to be August. There we go. My faithful mod is on top of things today. So there you go. August 12th. Okay. Mr. Anderson, why, oh, why do you keep fighting? So Mr. Anderson, good to see you. And I've always appreciated that Matrix reference name. So we got to get you on as well. We got to get you back on the channel. I've missed you as well. You're a fan favorite. And so Lorraine Drosophila, I showed you separate ancestry in the last show using mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosomal DNA. We could look to linkage blocks, orphan genes that lack any real consistent hierarchy. Okay. So we did that in our last show. I spent about 45 minutes engaging the chat on ERVs and also separate ancestry. Rock and Woodwork says, in terms of mutations and impact on humans, which are the genetic differences between people 2,000 to 3,000 years ago and those today? So Well, firstly, I like to point out that when it comes to the creation model, we believe in design diversity or created heterozygosity. Okay, so we're going to have to determine as creationists, what is the result of mutation accumulation, disease causing mutations, and what is created. Okay, and so a good way is to look at common alleles. Okay, this goes back to basic genetics and alleles, right? You got capital A, lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b. So if you're capital A, lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b, you're genetically heterozygous. You're in a state of DNA diversity. There's diversity there, that genetic loci or genetic location. If you're capital A, capital A, capital B, you're genetically homozygous or homogeneous. There's no diversity there. It's the same. And so God said to be fruitful and multiply. So it makes sense theologically and scientifically that God would have created the original created kinds, including Adam and Eve, with pre-existing functional genetic diversity. Heterozygosity is just a fancy way of saying a state of DNA diversity. And so if you apply that, capital A, lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b, apply that to millions of positions in the genome, you essentially have unlimited potential. You have an unlimited potential for variation, a lot of potential for adaptation with design diversity. And so we would look to common alleles that are not disease causing for the most part. Of course, mutations can hit a design variant that can result in disease. Okay. But this is just an initial way for us to determine what's created, what's mutation, and that your common alleles would be the result of creation. Functional regions of the genome like ERVs or pseudogenes would be created. And then those that occur at a rare frequency, those that are isolated, like blue eyes, for example, from my understanding, is just isolated in a subset of the population. Like I have blue eyes, and that would be a result of mutation. You can see those allele frequencies, an allele being a genetic variant, frequency being the frequency that it occurs in the population. Low frequency, high frequency, you can get a percentage of it. Okay, and so if something's at a low frequency, it's isolated to a small part of the population, then we can be confident to conclude that that's the result of mutation, probably after the Tower of Babel, when people start spreading out over the globe. That's also why we see geographically specific Y chromosomes. Okay, Chinese Y chromosomes, African Y chromosomes, European Y chromosomes, because after the Tower of Babel, people spread out to all parts of the globe and they start accumulating their own separate mutations. And so those accumulate, but yet it's interest in different populations. Okay, that's why they're geographically specific, but those occur after the spreading out. Okay, so they're less common, they're unique, but yet when you consider them all, they're all very similar. There's low variation and they can all be traced back to a single Y chromosomal common ancestor just 4,500 years ago. And so that answers the question of Lorraine as well, who asked about separate ancestry. The Y chromosome tells us there's one male ancestor of all people on the planet. The mitochondrial DNA says there's one female ancestor of all people on the planet. And the mitochondrial DNA is nothing like chimpanzee mitochondrial DNA. When you line them up and compare them, Dr. Rob Carter speaks on this, they're nothing alike, massive differences. And then when you take the Y chromosome of humans and compare it to the great apes, specifically chimpanzees, they're nothing alike as well. And so this demands separate ancestry, even though the evolutionists don't want to admit that. So I may not know Kung Fu, but I know crazy. So Doki, I appreciate that, brother. Let's see what else we have here. And this concept of created heterozygosity or design diversity makes predictions on DNA function. We would predict that the vast majority of the genome is functional. We would predict that these so-called evolutionary leftovers like ERVs, allele sequences, so-called pseudogenes, gene deserts, we would predict that these are functional design variants. Okay. And this again goes back to this idea that the majority of this noise is spurious. Okay. Because here's the thing, you have all of these, if you randomly have these transcription factors binding all over the genome, okay, what you're going to get is the mucking up of systems in the cell. This is just not ideal for the cell, for the function of the cell. What's going on suggests that the majority of this noise is actually functional. Okay, functional noise, not spurious. And that would be an expectation of the creation model, that the majority of the genome is functional, it's active, and that would point back to the concept of design diversity. Sydney Raptor says, so you are just quote mining parts of genetics. Well, I'd like to see where that was quote mined, where they agreed that the vast majority of mutations are deleterious. I want to see how that's a quote mine. Appear to support your assertions against the vast majority of genetic scientists. See, your population geneticists do agree that there's a challenge here, which is why they invoke mechanisms or solutions like synergistic epistasis, various forms of what I would call mutation count mechanism, super beneficial mutations. A lot of them will say there's a trade-off. I debated a biologist going back about 5 years ago. When I was in the infancy of my study, I debated in a formal debate, a modern day debate, Dr. Stefan Frello. He's a biologist, he's a working scientist, and he said, well, there's a trade-off. The fact that they're giving an answer or a so-called solution acknowledges that there's a problem that requires a solution. But the thing is, those solutions that they provide, that they invoke, that they assert, are not actually answering the problem. So the problem's still there. The challenge is still unresolved. They provide solutions, so they're acknowledging that there is a problem and a challenge, but those solutions don't work, which means by definition, the problem and the challenge is still there. It's still present. Okay, so I want to see where there is a quote mining. That would be interesting to see. Okay, let's see here. All right, this has been fun. I am excited to see the rest of CrashCourse's video in terms of our engagement of it with Kent. And Mr. Anderson says, I actually know wrestling, not Kung Fu. And so there's another thing Mr. Anderson and I have in common, is we're both former wrestlers. Or maybe he's a current wrestler. I don't know. But we both like wrestling. That's for sure. Sydney Raptor says, and I appreciate the questions, the comments, the challenges. This is good. This is fun. Do you admit that deleterious and beneficial is context specific? Well, it's environmentally dependent in the sense that you can have a narrow increase in fitness. One that comes to mind that might help understand this is sickle cell anemia, which provides a resistance to malaria resistance, but it's actually at the, so if you look at the genotype, what's going on under the hood? Okay. It's actually the result of a deformed hemoglobin molecule, if I understand correctly. So it's a broken protein, it's a broken cell, it's functionally compromising overall to the organism. So yeah, there's a narrow increase in fitness in the sense that, okay, it leaves those people resistant to malaria. But malaria is bad, sickle cell anemia is bad. You don't want either. Okay, both are harmful, both are damaging, both are diseases you don't want. And so sure, there's a narrow increase in fitness. That is, malaria is not going to kill them, even though sickle cell anemia will. But at the genotype, under the hood, it's a result of a broken protein, broken cell. So in terms of total functionality, or total fitness, it's a decrease. Narrow increases in fitness is not going to overturn the overall decrease in total functionality. It's total functionality that is important. Okay, if we wanted to make our living area space bigger, and so we have a wall separating the kitchen and the living room, and so we decide to knock down that wall to give us more room in that living area, okay? Well, firstly, that's not telling us how we built the house. That's not telling us how we built that area or even the wall. Like, we're knocking that down, okay? We're destroying it to create a benefit. And so that's what we're seeing in these so-called beneficial mutations, is we are oftentimes seeing a narrow increase in fitness, but it's at the result of degradation It's at the result of the destruction of pre-existing systems. We've seen that with Lenski's experiment. I talked about earlier how in every case in Lenski's experiment, or nearly every case, I don't like being too universal, but in nearly every case, the genes were broken. They were downregulated, deleted, eliminated. And I compare that to the removing weight from your car to temporarily get better gas mileage. And so that's what you see. You see just countless nucleotide sites in the genome being degraded, but then you might see a narrow increase or a narrow benefit. But as that's occurring, there's countless other positions that are still being degraded. So it's simply not going to counterbalance the damage, okay? Lorraine, why don't Homo sapiens show separate ancestry from gorillas? Well, I would argue that they do. If I screen share here and go to my presentation, I put together a visual here that shows, well, you can even see the Y chromosome visual too, that shows all of the massive differences in the Y chromosomes. Humans and chimpanzees, for example, you look at overall architecture, size differences, and gene content, and it's only about 35% the same. The human and gorilla Y are more similar to each other than the either are to the chimpanzee Y, okay? So we do have separate ancestry. We can discover what's related, what's not, including fossil data. I've got it right here where we've got humans, okay? You can look at a lot of genetic data, linkage block data. How come there's not more shuffling in the genome if we've evolved for millions of years, or just specifically go back to the out of Africa 100 to 200,000 years ago? Every generation you have recombination, gene conversion. How come we still have so many large linkage blocks? Why hasn't there, even with hot spots and cold spots, there should still be more scrambling? The genomes of humans should be more scrambling. It only looks like there's been about 4,500 years of recombination, of genomic shuffling. Okay, we've got orphan genes, these taxonomically restricted and essential genes. They don't form any consistent hierarchy. But what's interesting is what I have here in terms of the separate ancestry model actually matches almost perfectly what we see in the conventional literature. This is a visual showing the great ape Y chromosomes. Of course, they have humans in the great apes, right? Taxonomically, they view, so kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, they view humans, Homo sapiens, as being a human ape, human great ape. Then you got chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and the orangutans as non-human great apes. Well, you actually just look at the Y chromosomes. Okay, I think uniparentally inherited DNA is really good in determining or answering this question of ancestry, even more so than biparentally inherited nuclear DNA, autosomal DNA. Okay, there's no recombination, maybe a little bit at the ends, the tips in the Y chromosomes, but again, they're just inherited on one side. Y chromosome father side, mitochondrial DNA mother side. And so notice the human Y chromosome. Okay, I'm going to be going through Erica's video that she put out recently, but I didn't see no sophisticated mathematical model presented. I see a lot of guesswork. So for example, I see a lot of storytelling. I noticed even in her comment section of the video that there were some evolutionists, at least one, and I should go back and screenshot some, that were not all that impressed. Like even they recognize that there's just a lot of storytelling or a lot of guesswork in the papers being referenced. Okay, because remember, we don't actually have this so-called ancestor going back 6 million years ago, right? They got humans and chimpanzees and bonobos being related. They go back to this common ancestor 6 million years ago. What did this genome look like? Because this is the lineages today. This is the chimpanzee Y. Here's the human Y. Notice the heterochromatin, these densely packed pieces of DNA here, comprising satellite DNA repetitive sequences. It's basically non-existent in the chimpanzee line. So when was all this lost? When, how, where, why? Like I want to see a mathematical model. I want to see a sophisticated model. We haven't seen that yet. And so we don't have the genome of this common ancestor. So the evolutionary community has to assume that this common ancestor had similar genetics, right? And then since the split, these lineages changed. So there were chromosomal rearrangements, loss of chromatin, the addition of genes, the loss of genes. No, we just see a lot of imagination, a lot of storytelling. I want to see a very detailed model as to how these changes happened, when they happened, in what creatures or lineages they happened in. We don't see that. We don't find that. It's wishful thinking. What we have is the raw data here. Okay. And so human Y chromosome here, it's half the size. I want to know when all of this was lost. When did it become half the size? In light of the sperm competition that Erica does point out, that's legit. Okay. That's valid. This can explain, if you notice the bonobo and chimpanzee, it's not like there's a massive difference in architecture, gene content. It's still pretty similar. But once you bring in the human Y, there's drastic, massive changes you have to explain. Chimpanzees and bonobos can go back 4,500 years to a common ancestor archetype, and you can explain those differences, okay, from a creationist model. But if you want an evolutionary model where you're going to bring in humans 6 million years ago, now we really have to have some answers to these changes. Again, the heterochromatin, was all that just lost? We understand this heterochromatin is important. It's functional. And so when you bring in the gorilla Y, here's the thing. If you refute or overturn the idea that humans and chimpanzees are related, then obviously humans and gorillas aren't related. Or are you going to say that humans are more closely related to gorillas than chimpanzees? No, I don't think the evolutionist is going to go that route. So once you stay as close to home as possible and refute the idea or concept that humans and chimpanzees go back to a common ancestor, then you refute the idea that humans and any other form of life are related. If humans and chimpanzees aren't related based on the data and the evidence, then humans and strawberries or humans and mosquitoes are definitely not related. And that includes gorillas and orangutans. Okay. And so the thing is, the orangutan species, they're close enough where they can go back to an archetype. We can explain those. The gorilla, it can be its own. Okay. Because you're going to have extinct creatures as well. You could have species or variations come about after the flood and then go extinct as well, where we don't have them living today. Okay. So today we have living gorilla. And so they're their own kind. And bonobos and chimpanzees go back to their archetype. But humans are just so different to the chimpanzee and the bonobo species here, okay, that the only real valid conclusion is that they are unrelated. I also went into an entire presentation at Kent's boot camp on the amazing evidence for Adam and Eve, the biblical Adam and Eve. And I went through the Eve consensus sequence data that's published by Young Earth Creationists in the conventional literature, and discussed how we have Eve's sequence. We know her sequence. And on average, any person only differs by the consensus sequence by a few nucleotides. And then when it comes to the most, because the average is only between 20 and 25, maybe 30 max. And then the most, you've got, I think, about 140 in some deeper lineages. And your highest and your average can be accounted for in a creationist time frame. Okay, but if evolution is true, why is there such little variation? Why is there so few DNA differences? That's a challenge that the evolutionists have not sufficiently engaged or answered. Okay, and Mr. Anderson strikes again. Are you thinking of maybe doing a debate with Erica on this topic of the human Y chromosome versus the great ape Y chromosome? Yeah, I'd probably do that. That would be fun. He says he'd watch that. You know, it's been a while since I've had a formal debate with Erica. I do appreciate her engagement, her videos. I think Brian and we finished recently a series responding to her chromosome 2 fusion stuff in junk DNA, but he wants to work together and refute her latest, or at least interact with her latest video on transitional fossils and homology. So I think we'll be doing that. I did 3 formal debates with Guts and Gibbon going back years now. So we are probably getting to the point where there should be a rematch. Might be even more exciting than the new Avengers movies coming out. So Andrew Cummings says, so orangutans, chimps, and gorillas aren't the same ape kind then? No, I've been arguing for a while that you've got your human kind, you've got your gorilla kind, your chimpanzees and bonobos, I would argue based on the data, are related and go back to an archetype. And then your orangutan species most likely go back to their own archetype as well. And as far as I can see so far, the differences that we see in the ones that are related can be explained in a sophisticated manner in 4,500 years. The challenge to the evolutionary community, though, is how can they explain the differences? Because they want to bring in humans now. They want to bring in humans and say that these are all related. Well, they have a bigger challenge because now they have to explain all of those massive changes, rearrangements, and losses in both the human and chimpanzee lineages. And that's a much harder task. Okay. So anyways, let's look through here a bit, and I think we'll start winding it down as we're coming at the 2-hour mark. And this has been fun. Got a good chat. Some of my favorite peeps here. So Andrew Cummings says, interesting, that creates some other problems then. Well, I'd like to see what those problems are, and maybe we can interact with them and discuss them. Because here's the thing. Humans were, from the biblical model and starting point where we make predictions, retrodictions, humans were created as two, but animals were created in bulk. And so we're expecting a lot more diversity. So yeah, it's not a surprise that we see. That's why a lot of what we see in the biological world other than humans has to be taken as a case-to-case basis in a way, okay, where it's not just a one-size-fits rule. What I mean by that is, okay, humans and chimpanzees may have less diversity between themselves than lions and tigers and domesticated cats and leopards and so on and so forth. But here's the thing. Yeah, as creationists, we would agree probably for the most part. Again, when it comes to ancestry and declaring relationship, we don't want to be too dogmatic, okay? Because there are a lot of unknowns. There's still a lot of genetic sequencing that needs to be done in these creatures, okay? So yeah, we could say probably confidently that lions, tigers, jaguars, leopards, domesticated cats go back to an archetype. Okay. Now they have more diversity though between them than humans and chimps. But then we don't say as creationists that humans and chimpanzees are related. But again, chimpanzees do fall into the animal category. They do fall into the category of creatures that we would expect have more diversity. Okay. Because God created animals in bulk. So they're going to start off with more diversity. And yet we have a matching prediction of that, or confirmation, because we see overall in the biological world, animals do have more levels of genetic diversity, where humans started off as two. And so they're going to have lower levels of genetic diversity. So yeah, we're going to see some differences there. We're going to have some things to consider as we do our bare monological analyses, whether it's through fossil data, where we want to look at discontinuities and continuities, or genetic data, where we also want to look at discontinuities and continuities, like the discontinuity we see in Y chromosome, or the discontinuity we see in mitochondrial DNA, or what we observe in orphan genes, linkage blocks, differences in the way similar genes between humans and chimps are expressed or regulated, or epigenetic differences, or alternative splicing differences, or differences in the 3D arrangement of these genomes. Okay. Excellent question, Mr. Anderson. Why would animals have higher levels of diversity when they all went down to 2 and we went down to 6? See, here's the thing. At creation, you have animals created in bulk. Okay. You have more diversity, a lot more genes floating around these populations of tens of thousands to maybe millions strong. Hard to know exactly how many. You have a lot more genes floating around those populations than you do in humans. Humans God creates 2 that restricts genetic diversity. And with the evolutionary model, think about it. You got Australopithecine-like ancestors evolving into Homo habilis, evolving into Homo erectus, who lives on the globe for 1 million plus years. Now, it's important to know that mutations add diversity because they're adding something that was not previously there. So every generation for millions of years, you have all these mutations accumulating. And so you'd expect humans today to have more levels of diversity that they do have, if evolution is true. Okay. But no, we have low levels of diversity, matching the position that says we started off as 2, and that restricts levels of genetic diversity. Now, you have at creation a 1 generation bottleneck at creation. Well, that's followed up with what? Rapid and exponential population growth. Adam and Eve have kids, their kids have kids, and you can expect a lot of the same with animals, except you have more different creatures having kids because it's not just 2 that you start off with. And so they're filling up the globe really fast. Then 2,000 years, you have another single generation bottleneck. Okay. Single generation bottleneck with the archetypes. You got, 2 of some, 7 or 14, depending. We can discuss that and debate that. Okay. But there is a bottleneck. So the number is drastically reduced. We can, for sake of argument, we can assume that the most heterozygous animals were brought on board the ark. But here's the thing, is this is a 1 generation bottleneck again, followed up by rapid and exponential population growth, where creatures move out, they start having kids, they start multiplying quickly. Okay, where humans, they don't spread out to all parts of the globe. And so maybe they exist between 10,000 and 100,000 at the Tower of Babel, maybe 400 years later. Okay, so they still have not spread out to all parts of the globe. God has to confuse the languages and force people to finally spread out to all parts of the globe. And animals have already done so. And so since it was a 1 generation bottleneck, they would have retained more levels of genetic heterozygosity, more levels of genetic diversity, since it wasn't a prolonged bottleneck like the evolutionary model has in the out of Africa story, okay, which is a prolonged bottleneck where you have a lot of inbreeding, you have a lot of genetic diversity being destroyed. But the creation model is different. You have 2 bottlenecks and another one at the Tower of Babel, but these are all short-lived. 1 generation, they're followed by rapid and exponential population growth. So these animals spreading out, reproducing quickly, retaining more levels of heterozygosity, they're going to create more diversity because they started off with more diversity at creation and at the ark, and now as they move to all parts of the globe. Okay. And so that's why animals today can still have high levels of diversity, higher levels of diversity, although there are some exceptions, but the exception doesn't overturn the rule, and humans still having lower level of genetic diversity. Okay. So, and speaking of that, that's why we have the CO1 gene, that highly conserved mitochondrial DNA protein that has low diversity across the entire biological kingdom. And that's why the researchers of that study, Rockefeller study, the genetic boundaries study, concluded that all species must have originated at about the same time. Now, we wouldn't say that's a creation event. We're saying that those are the species that have come about after the ark, after Noah's flood, over the last 4,500 years from those ark archetypes. Okay. Creation would be 2,000 years before that. So, yeah, they're going to decrease in heterozygosity because of the bottleneck. But because it's a single generation bottleneck followed up with rapid and exponential population growth, they're going to retain a lot of that heterozygosity. Okay. And because they're multiplying fast, they're spreading out, they're adding more genetic diversity to their population than humans are. So we would still expect the same thing that we would at creation, that humans are going to have lower levels of genetic diversity than animals. And that's what we find. So, okay. We're over 2 hours now, and this creationist is starting to get a little tired, and his back's getting a little sore too. So I think we're gonna start winding it down. And I want to go over some announcements. Okay, guys, this has been the summer of all summers. July was a blast. June was a blast. We've had just a huge amount of epic debate, especially in the theology world, eschatology, soteriology. And so August is going to be no different. We got quite a bit. As a matter of fact, Dr. Peter Lyell and I on the 2nd, we're going to continue our video here. So part 2 on how the human brain refutes evolution. That'll be, I think, Friday it is. We've got some deity of Christ debates coming up. So this is Sam Shamoon and Stacy Turville. Should be fun. We got Praise I Am and Caleb Percher engaging Trinitarianism versus monarchianism. This is coming up. This one we did last week. Guys, if you don't believe in the supernatural, you will after watching this. Go into the live stream section, find our show with Jennifer Niza, undeniable evidence for the supernatural. Her testimony is fascinating. Her encounters, her experiences in the psychic world are truly amazing and provide, again, undeniable evidence for the supernatural. So any objective thinker is going to be forced to conclude that, yes, there is a world beyond this one. There is the spiritual world. We get into the truth of demons. Jennifer Niza talks about how when she was a psychic medium and the information was being downloaded and given to her about people she just met and information that only those people knew. And they were blown away by the fact that she knew this information. She had this information. Countless stories and experiences that she gets into in this show with demons, the spiritual world. Guys, truly fascinating show. And I want it to spread far and wide. So go check that one out. Make sure you watch it. Make sure you share it around. And again, if you're an objective thinker and you are skeptical of the supernatural, this will undoubtedly change your mind. We got the Great Purgatory debate coming up. Protestant versus Catholic. William Elbrecht versus Turretin fan. We got another Protestant versus Catholic debate. This is the Great Eucharist debate. Dan Chapa and Dr. Robertson Jenna. So this is coming up in August as well. Did the New Testament prophecy fail? Did New Testament prophecy fail, I should say. Tristan Gabriel and Dr. Sam Frost. They're going to be duking it out. I think actually this will be early September. So I'm actually booking now into October. So we got some big debates coming in October for you. We've got this one here. This will be a huge one. Jake the Muslim metaphysician versus William Elbrecht. Was Justin Martyr a Trinitarian? And I'm busy confirming the final details on an epic soteriology showdown. Hopefully we confirm the details. We're close between Dr. Steve Gregg and Dr. Bob Wilkin. Can a believer lose his salvation? So we're close to confirming those details, agreeing on details, and that'll be October as well. So guys, get ready for a lot of exciting events, some fun shows ahead of you for you guys to enjoy. Okay. So dokie dokie. Appreciate that, brother. 2 days, Caleb versus Praise. And then I think it's the very next day that we're going to have the servant in Isaiah, LBL versus Taylor Stewart. And that'll be another nature of God debate. So guys, we're working hard to give you a diversity of topics to enjoy, to feel edified from. We want to get people out of their echo chambers. So that's important. Anyways, with our creation, evolution, theology, and all that stuff out of the way, I did want to give one shout out here to another aspect of our ministry. And a big reason I want to do so as well is because we're getting lots of good reviews, lots of good feedback. People are really benefiting from this. My wife is working overtime to get everybody their products around the globe, including Australia. Today, she was sending out orders. So people are really benefiting from this. JB Naturals skincare company. You're going to look young forever. The truth is, I'm about 85 years old. I know. And it's all because of this. And obviously that's a little tongue in cheek, but in all seriousness, check this out. jbnaturalskincare.com. This is a branch off of standingfortruthministries.com, an aspect of it. And so you can find cleansers, serums, body butter. The body butters are so good that they look like you want to eat it for dessert, but don't. don't actually eat the whipped body butters, but they look like you want to eat them, especially as they're being made. So nourish, balance. I mean, she's really done a fantastic job with this website. I'm extremely impressed. And I'm just really loving all the feedback, the reviews, and just how much people are benefiting from it. And that is people here in our hometown as well that are benefiting from it. So we get to hear it in person, the feedback. Okay. And so these carefully crafted products, they're gentle, very gentle, which is something I'm always cognizant about in the products I use, but they're also effective, and they're made from all natural ingredients. And that's where it takes us back to our defensive creation, biblical creation. Okay. So these kinds of ingredients are important in terms of what we do and what we value. And so, okay, I think we're going to call it now. This has been fun. I really enjoyed this program. Doki Doki always coming through, my brother, my fellow coffee fan. Hope the coffee is hot. I'm looking forward to my coffee coming up, as I got a lot of work to do tonight in terms of confirming some of these shows, and also preparing for some more video responses for everybody to enjoy here coming up. Okay. Big stack. Well, we've got Sam, our award-winning co-host. We've also got Sam Shamoon, who's going to be doing 2 debates coming up, one with Stacey Turbeville, one with Otis Lewis. So that should be fun. Okay. Sophia says, half of my bed is full of clothes, makeup, and skin products. You and my wife would get along with the skin products there. Rock and Woodwork says, thank you, Donnie, and everyone for the answers and conversation. Always pleasant and thoughtful. Even if you don't agree with me, I want it to be thought-provoking. I wanted to challenge your views, challenge your position. And that's why I've been doing more of this than usual. Okay. Well, not necessarily more than usual, but over the last few days with Peter Line, I spent about 45 minutes engaging the audience. Today, over an hour engaging the audience, the critics, the skeptics, and their objections and challenges. Okay. Sorry, if you're not yet subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to share this content around. As guys, the truth is important, but not only that, critical thinking is very important. Okay. So we don't want to just exist in an echo chamber. We want to engage those around us that may or may not agree with us. Sophia says, Justin Martyr clearly affirmed the divinity of Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, referring to them as God and attributing divine qualities to them. Appreciate that knowledge there, Sophia. It makes me even more, that much more excited for our debate coming up here in October. It's going to be a massive one, guys. Was Justin Martyr a Trinitarian? So, okay, with that, guys, I hope everybody enjoyed tonight's show. We'll see you this week. We got shows for you all week long, as we do week after week. So, okay, thank you for tuning in. Standing for Truth is out. God bless.